Captain Lee Dong-woo stared at the strange signal on his screen and rubbed his tired eyes. The exploration ship Soul's Pride had been flying through empty space for 3 weeks now, and the crew was getting bored. They were supposed to map this sector of space and look for anything interesting, but so far they had found nothing except rocks and gas clouds. The signal was different, though. It was not like anything in their databases, and it seemed to be coming from near a neutron star called Thanatos 7. Dong-woo knew that neutron stars were dangerous places where ships could get crushed or fried by radiation, but something about this signal made him curious. "So-min, come look at this," he called to his chief engineer Park So-min, who was fixing a broken coffee machine in the corner of the bridge. So-min was small and quick with short black hair and hands that were always dirty from working on machines. She could fix anything, and had saved their ship more times than Dong-woo could count, so Min walked over and looked at the screen while wiping her hands on a rag. "That is weird," she said after studying the signal for a minute. "It looks like a distress call, but the pattern is all wrong, and there are other signals mixed in, like maybe a lot of ships are there." Dong-woo felt his heart beat faster. First contact with alien life was every explorer's dream, but it was also every explorer's nightmare. Humans had been flying through space for 50 years and had never found anyone else alive out there. Maybe they were finally about to change. That. "Tae-ho, what do you think?" Dong-woo asked his tactical officer Kim Tae-ho, who was a big man with serious eyes who always seemed ready for a fight. Tae-ho had been a soldier before joining the exploration service, and he thought about danger differently than the rest of them. Tae-ho frowned at his weapons display. "The neutron star makes scanning hard, but I am picking up massive energy readings from that direction. Whatever is out there is big and using a lot of power. Could be dangerous." The last crew member on the bridge was Yoon Ji-hye, their communications officer who had been trying to decode the signal. Ji-hye was young and smart and could speak 6 languages, which made her perfect for talking to new people if they ever found any. She looked up from her station with excitement in her eyes. "Captain, I think this might be it," Ji-hye said. "I am getting multiple signal types and some of them might be voices. The computer cannot translate anything, but there are definitely patterns." That looked like language. Dong-woo felt a knot in his stomach. Regulations said they should report any possible alien contact to Earth Command and wait for orders. That would take months because they were so far from home, and by then whatever was happening near the neutron star might be over. But if there really were aliens in trouble, and they did nothing, then Dong-woo would never forgive himself. "Set course for Thanatos 7, he decided. "We will take a look and see what is going on. If it is too dangerous, we will jump away and call for help." So-min looked worried. "Captain, our ship was not built to get close to neutron stars. The radiation and gravity will mess up our systems and maybe kill us." "I know the risks," Dong-woo said. "But we might be looking at first contact here. We have to try." It took 6 hours to reach the neutron star, and the trip got scarier every minute. The Soul's Pride started shaking as the neutron star's gravity grabbed them and pulled them forward. Warning lights flashed on every console as radiation started cooking their electronics. So-min ran around the ship trying to keep everything working while the rest of them watched their instruments go crazy. "There!" Ji-hye shouted suddenly, pointing at her screen. "I can see it." On the main display, a huge structure appeared near the neutron star. It looked like a giant wheel made of metal and crystal that was spinning slowly in space. Lights flashed along its surface, and dozens of strange ships were docked to it like insects on a flower. The whole thing was bigger than any human city. "What is that?" Tae-ho whispered. Before anyone could answer, their ship started falling apart. The neutron star's radiation fried their main computer, and their engines began making terrible grinding noises. So-min's voice came over the intercom from the engine room, and she sounded scared. "Captain, we are losing everything. The engines are going to explode in about 2 minutes." Dong-woo felt panic rise in his throat, but forced himself to stay calm. "Can you fix it?" "Not in time. We need to land somewhere now or we are all dead. There was only one place to land, and that was the alien station. Dongwu grabbed the manual controls as their automated systems failed one by one. The Soul's Pride tumbled toward the station while pieces of it broke off and flew away into space. Jihai, send out a distress signal on all frequencies, Dongwu ordered while fighting to control their spinning ship. Tell them we are crashing and need help. I am trying, but I do not know if they can understand us, Jihai replied. The station grew bigger and bigger until it filled their entire view. Dongwu could see a huge opening that looked like a docking bay and aimed for it. Their ship smashed through some kind of energy barrier and hit the deck hard enough to throw everyone around like dolls in a box. When the crashing and sliding finally stopped, Dongwu found himself hanging upside down in his chair with blood running down his forehead. Emergency lights flickered and something was making a loud beeping noise. He could hear the others groaning and moving around, so at least they were alive. Everyone okay? He called out. I think so, came Somin's voice from somewhere behind him. But our ship is totally broken. We are not flying anywhere soon. Dongwu unbuckled himself and fell to what used to be the ceiling. Through the cracked main screen, he could see they were inside a massive chamber filled with ships, unlike anything humans had ever built. Some looked like they were made of crystal, while others seemed to be covered in scales or spikes. Strange. Lights moved in patterns he did not understand. Captain, Jihai whispered from where she was picking herself up off the floor. Look outside. Through the broken windows, they could see creatures moving toward their ship. Some walked on two legs like humans, but were much taller and had extra arms. Others seemed to float through the air without touching the ground. One group looked like they were made of living shadow. The creatures surrounded the Soul's Pride, and Dongwu realized they were carrying weapons, big weapons that glowed with energy and looked like they could cut through their ship like paper. He had wanted first contact, but maybe not like this. What do we do now, Captain? Taeho asked while checking his sidearm. Dongwu took a deep breath and tried to think. They were crashed on an alien station near a neutron star with no way to leave and surrounded by armed creatures they could not talk to. It was probably the worst first contact situation possible, but they were stuck with it. We go outside and try to talk to them, he said. Maybe we can make them understand we are not a threat. The four humans gathered at the airlock and put on their emergency suits. When they opened the door, warm air rushed in that smelled like metal and ozone. The gravity felt normal, and they could breathe, but everything else was alien and strange. As they stepped out of their broken ship, the creatures pointed their weapons at them and made sounds that might have been talking. One of them was bigger than the others and had 4 arms and red eyes. It stepped forward and spoke in a voice like grinding rocks. The humans could not understand a word, but the meaning was clear. They were prisoners now, and their fate would be decided by beings they knew nothing about. Dongwu looked at his crew and saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. They were explorers, and this was what they had signed up for, even if it was scarier than anything they had imagined. The adventure was just beginning. The 4 humans were marched through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The walls were covered in symbols that hurt to look at, and the air hummed with energy that made their teeth ache. Creatures of all shapes and sizes watched them pass, and none of them looked friendly. Li Dongwu tried to stay calm as their guards pushed them along, but it was hard when everything around them screamed danger. The alien with 4 arms and red eyes walked beside them and kept making noises that sounded like metal being scraped together. Other creatures joined them as they walked, including one that looked like it was made of living crystal and another that seemed to be just a moving shadow with glowing eyes. They entered a huge chamber with a ceiling so high Dongwu could not see the top. Hundreds of aliens filled rows of seats that circled around a central platform. The noise they made was like being inside a storm with thunder and wind and the screaming of animals all mixed together. The humans were forced onto the platform while the alien crowd grew quiet. Dongwu looked around and saw creatures that belonged in nightmares. Some had too many teeth, while others had no face at all. A few were so big they could step on a human and not notice, while others were small but covered in spikes that dripped with poison. The four-armed alien stepped forward and spoke in that grinding rock voice. Even though the humans could not understand the words, they could feel the power behind them. This was someone important and probably very dangerous. HFY whispered to the others while trying not to move her lips. I think this is some kind of trial or meeting. Look at how they are all watching us. A new alien appeared on the platform, and this one was even scarier than the four-armed one. It looked like a shadow that had learned to walk, and its voice was like cold wind blowing through a graveyard. When it spoke, the entire chamber fell silent. I am getting some of this, HFY said quietly. The computer is starting to pick up patterns in their language. I think they are arguing about what to do with us. Taeho kept his hand near his weapon. But Dongwu caught his eye and shook his head slightly. Fighting would just get them killed faster, and there had to be a better way to handle this. The shadow creature and the four-armed one seemed to be having an argument while pointing at the humans. Other aliens joined in, and soon the whole chamber was filled with noise again. Finally, the shadow creature raised one dark arm and everything went quiet. It pointed at the humans and spoke one word that somehow they all understood, even though it was in an alien language. Prove. Suddenly, the platform began to move and split apart. Before the humans could react, they were separated onto 4 different smaller platforms that carried them away from each other. Dongwu reached out toward his crew, but they were already too far apart to touch. "Stay together!" he shouted, but it was too late. So Min found herself in a room filled with broken machines and twisted metal. Strange tools hung from the walls, and the floor was covered with the remains of things that looked like they had exploded. In the center of the room was a device covered in alien symbols with wires and pipes coming out of it in all directions. A voice spoke from hidden speakers in a language she was starting to understand thanks to their computer's translation work. Fix the machine or die. Many have tried. All have failed. You have 1 hour. So Min walked over to the device and immediately saw the problem. It was not broken exactly, but it was built all wrong. Whoever made it had tried to force too much power through circuits that could not handle it. The alien engineers had been thinking like aliens instead of thinking like engineers. She pulled out her toolkit and started taking the machine apart. The aliens had used crystal circuits where they should have used metal, and metal wires where they should have used crystal. It was like they had never heard of basic electrical theory. Meanwhile, Taeho was in what looked like an arena with sand on the floor and walls covered in sharp metal spikes. Across from him stood an alien that looked like the four-armed one, but smaller and younger. It held 2 weapons that glowed with energy and moved like a trained fighter. The voice from the speakers was clearer now as their computer learned more of the language. "Combat trial! Defeat the warrior or die. No weapons except what you find. Begin!" The young alien charged at Taeho with both weapons swinging. Taeho rolled to the side and grabbed a handful of sand from the floor. He was bigger than most humans, and stronger than most humans, but this alien was bigger and stronger than him. Fighting it straight up would be suicide. The alien swung again, and Taeho threw the sand in its eyes. While it was blinded, he dove between its legs and grabbed one of the weapons that it dropped. The weapon felt strange in his hands, but the trigger was easy enough to figure out. HFY was in a completely dark room where she could not see her own hands. Something was moving in the darkness with her, and she could hear it breathing. The translation system was working better now, and the voice from the speakers was almost clear. "Survive the hunter. The Umbrax can see in perfect darkness and move without sound. They have never failed to catch their prey. You have 30 minutes, HFY closed her eyes and tried to think. If she could not see, then vision was useless. She needed to use her other senses and her brain. The creature in the dark was a hunter, which meant it thought like a predator. But predators had weaknesses too. She started talking, not to the creature, but to herself. She told herself about her childhood and her family and her dreams. She made her voice sad and scared, which was not hard to do. Predators liked weak prey, and maybe she could make the hunter overconfident. Dongwu was on a platform high above, an arena where he could see his crew fighting for their lives. Below him stood the biggest alien he had seen yet. It had 6 arms and was covered in scars and carried weapons that looked like they could cut through steel. Single combat, the voice said. Defeat the champion or watch your pack die. No help allowed. Begin now. The champion roared and swung a massive sword at Dongwu's head. He ducked and realized that this fight was impossible to win. The alien was too big and too strong and too experienced. But maybe that was the point. Maybe this was not about winning at all. Instead of fighting back, Dongwu started shouting to his crew. He called out advice to So-Min about the machine and warnings to Taeho about his opponent's next move and encouragement to Ji-Hai in her dark prison. The champion kept attacking, but Dongwu kept dodging and kept talking to his people. So-Min heard her captain's voice and smiled as she rewired the alien machine. She started explaining what she was doing loud enough for everyone to hear. The crystals went here and the metal went there and the power flow had to be balanced just right. Taeho heard both of them and began fighting differently. Instead of trying to beat his opponent, he started wearing it down. He stayed just out of reach and made the young alien chase him around the arena until it got tired and sloppy. Ji-Hai heard all 3 of her crewmates and realized what Dongwu was doing. He was turning 4 separate fights into one team effort. She stopped acting scared and started acting smart. She began describing the sounds the hunter made when it moved and the patterns of its breathing. The aliens in the great chamber watched in confusion as the humans did something none of them had ever seen before. Instead of fighting alone, they were fighting together, even though they were separated. They were sharing information and helping each other and treating the trials like a group problem instead of individual tests. So-Min finished rewiring the machine and it hummed to life with clean power flowing through properly designed circuits. She had not just fixed it, but had made it better than it ever was before. Taeho caught his tired opponent with a move his captain had suggested and knocked it unconscious without killing it. He had won through endurance and teamwork instead of violence. Ji-Hai tricked the hunter into walking into a wall by describing exactly where it was to her crewmates, who called out directions back to her. The confused predator knocked itself out on the metal barrier. Dongwu never did beat the champion in single combat, but that was fine because his crew had already won their trials. When the big alien finally cornered him, Dongwu just smiled and pointed to his people who were standing victorious in their own arenas. The great chamber fell silent as the aliens tried to understand what they had just seen. These small, weak creatures had not just survived the trials, but had done it in a way that broke all the rules. They had worked together when they should have worked alone and had used their minds when they should have used their strength. The shadow creature appeared on Dongwu's platform and studied him with glowing eyes. When it spoke, its voice carried a new tone that might have been respect. "What manner of creatures are you?" it asked in words the humans could now understand. "We are explorers from Earth," Dongwu replied. "We came here by accident, but we do not wish to cause trouble." "Earth," the shadow creature repeated. "This world must be investigated. If it produces beings such as you, then it must be classified as the highest level of Deathworld." Dongwu felt a chill run down his spine. He had a feeling that getting the galaxy's attention might not be the good thing he had hoped it would be. 3 weeks later, Li Dongwu stood on the bridge of an alien ship that was bigger than most human cities and watched Earth grow larger on the main screen. The ship belonged to the Galactic Deathworld Assembly, and it carried representatives from every dangerous species in the galaxy. They were all coming to see the world that had produced the strange creatures who had crashed their meeting. The aliens had been polite enough, after the trials ended. They fixed the soul's pride and gave the humans food and rooms to sleep in, while they prepared for the journey to Earth. But Dongwu could see the fear in their eyes when they looked at him and his crew. These beings, who thought they were the most dangerous things in the galaxy, were afraid of 4 lost humans. So Min was working with the alien engineers and driving them crazy by suggesting improvements to their technology. Every machine she looked at, she found ways to make better, and the aliens could not understand how someone from a supposedly primitive world could teach them anything. Taeho was training with the Vorthak warriors and beating them in strategy games even though they were twice his size and had been fighting for centuries. They respected him, but they also watched him like he might explode at any moment. Ji-Hai was having the most fun talking to all the different species and learning their languages. She had already figured out how to speak basic Vorthak and Umbrax, and was working on the crystal language of the Shardlings. The aliens were amazed at how fast she learned, but also worried about what else humans might be able to do. The leader of the expedition was the shadow creature called Nextar, who seemed to be some kind of super predator among his own people. He spent most of his time staring at displays full of data about Earth and making worried noises. Next to him stood Krix Tal, the 4-armed Vorthak general who had wanted to execute the humans at first, but now treated them like dangerous bombs. That might go off. The third leader was Zethra, a Shardling whose crystal body could cut through steel and who thought about everything like it was a science experiment. She kept asking the humans questions about their biology and their world that made them uncomfortable. "Tell me again about this oxygen gas that fills your atmosphere," Zethra said to Dongwu while her crystal face reflected the light from Earth. "You say it makes up 21% of the air you breathe." "That is right," Dongwu replied. "Why is that strange?" "Because oxygen is one of the most corrosive substances in the galaxy," Zethra explained. "It destroys almost everything it touches. Most species cannot be near it without dying, and you breathe it every moment of your lives." Dongwu shrugged. "It seems normal to us. We need it to live." All 3 alien leaders made noises that their translators could not handle. Apparently, the idea of breathing poison was too crazy for their languages to describe. As they got closer to Earth, the aliens became more and more nervous. Their instruments showed them a world covered in liquid that would dissolve most known materials and weather patterns that would kill anyone unlucky enough to be caught in them. Lightning storms raged across the surface while the ground itself moved and shifted under the pressure of invisible forces. "How do you survive on such a world?" Nextar asked in his cold voice. "We adapt," Ji-Hai said cheerfully. "Humans are good at adapting." When they finally entered Earth's atmosphere, the alien ship's shields started flashing warnings about the corrosive air outside. The crew had to wear special protection suits just to avoid being poisoned by the oxygen that leaked into their ship. Meanwhile, the 4 humans breathed normally and enjoyed being home. They landed in Seoul, where crowds of people had gathered to see the first alien visitors to Earth. The aliens took one look at the thousands of humans and immediately called for backup. To them, it looked like the planet was covered in apex predators who showed no fear of the huge alien ship. President Choi Min-seo met them at the landing site with a full honor guard. She was a small woman with gray hair and a smile that made the aliens nervous because they could not tell if she was being friendly or threatening. Behind her stood Admiral Bang Kyung-ho, who looked like he was ready for a fight, and Dr. Lim Hai-wan, who kept taking notes about everything the aliens did. "Welcome to Earth," President Choi said in perfect galactic standard, which surprised everyone, because humans were not supposed to know that language. "We hope your visit will be peaceful and educational." Nextar stepped forward, and his shadow form seemed to grow darker. "We are here to investigate this Deathworld and determine its threat level. Your people will cooperate or face the consequences." President Choi's smile did not change, but Admiral Bang stepped closer to her side. "Of course we will cooperate. We have nothing to hide. But you are guests on our world, and you will be treated as such. That means you follow our rules while you are here." The alien leaders looked at each other in confusion. They were used to being the most dangerous things around and having everyone fear them. But these humans seemed to think they were in charge just because this was their planet. Dr. Lim stepped forward with her tablet computer. "If you want to understand Earth and humans, then we should give you a proper tour. Would you like to see how we live?" That turned out to be a terrible mistake from the aliens' point of view. The first stop was a simple restaurant where humans were eating food that would kill most galactic species. The aliens watched in horror as people consumed plants that contained deadly acids and meats that were loaded with bacteria. "This food would poison us," Zethra said, while scanning a bowl of soup with her instruments. "Really?" said the restaurant owner, who was an old man with kind eyes. "Would you like to try something milder? Maybe some water." When he brought them a glass of plain water, the alien scanners went crazy. The H2O that humans drank every day was considered a dangerous solvent by most species, and handling it required special equipment. The next stop was even worse. Dr. Lim took them to a local school where human children were playing outside during a thunderstorm. Lightning flashed across the sky and rain poured down while the kids laughed and ran around with no protection at all. "You let your young ones out during an electrical storm?" Crixtal asked in disbelief. "It is just a little rain," one of the teachers said. "The children like to play in puddles." The aliens huddled under an energy shield and watched small humans splashing in water that fell from the sky during a natural disaster. When one child slipped and fell, the aliens nearly called for emergency medical help, but the kid just got up and kept playing. That evening they visited an amusement park, and that was when the aliens really started to panic. They watched humans strap themselves into machines that spun them through the air at dangerous speeds, while the people screamed with joy instead of terror. The roller coaster made 3 of the alien guards faint, and Nextar had to retreat to the ship. "Why do you torture yourselves for entertainment?" Zethra asked while her crystal body shook with fear. "It is fun," Somin explained as she got off the roller coaster for the 3rd time. "The danger makes it exciting." "But you could die," Crixtal pointed out. "We could die crossing the street too," Tejo said. "That does not mean we stop living." Chapter. Final shock came when Dr. Lim showed them video footage of humans in different environments around Earth. She showed them people living in frozen wastelands where the temperature would freeze most aliens solid. She showed them humans working in deserts hot enough to melt metal. She showed them people swimming in oceans full of predators and explorers climbing mountains that reached into the poisonous atmosphere. "Your species lives in every environment on this death world," Nextar said when he finally came back from the ship wearing extra armor. "Earth is our home," Dongwu explained. "All of it. We do not just survive here. We thrive here." "But how?" Zethra asked. "Our scientists say this world should be classified as multiple separate death worlds. The Arctic regions alone would kill most species we know. The desert areas are worse than planets we use to execute criminals. And you live in all of them. We adapt," Jihai said again. "We make tools and build shelters and work together to survive. That is what humans do." The aliens spent 3 more days on Earth, and every day made them more nervous. They saw humans keeping predatory animals as pets and eating substances that were toxic to most life. They watched people work with dangerous chemicals and electricity like they were harmless toys. They observed humans playing sports that involved deliberate violence and celebrating when someone got hurt. By the time they were ready to leave, the alien delegates were traumatized. They had come expecting to find a typical death world with some unusually clever inhabitants. Instead, they had discovered a planet that was so dangerous it should not be able to support life at all, and a species that treated mortal peril like a fun afternoon activity. "We must call an emergency session of the Assembly," Nextar announced as their ship prepared to leave Earth orbit. "This changes everything we thought we knew about death worlds and dangerous species." What will you tell them? President Choi asked. That we have found something that scares us, Crixtall admitted. And we are supposed to be the scariest things in the galaxy. As the alien ship disappeared into space, Dongwu wondered what would happen next. He had a feeling that introducing humanity to the galactic community was going to be more complicated than anyone expected. The emergency session of the Galactic Deathworld Assembly was the largest gathering of dangerous species in recorded history. Representatives came from every corner of the galaxy to hear the report about Earth and decide what to do about the humans. Lee Dongwu and his crew stood in the center of the Great Chamber while thousands of aliens argued about their fate. The three expedition leaders had delivered their report, and it had caused chaos. Some species wanted to recruit humans as ultimate warriors, while others wanted to destroy Earth before humans could spread to other worlds. A few suggested putting the entire solar system under quarantine and pretending humans did not exist. Nextar stood on the central platform with his shadow form darker than usual. The evidence is clear, he announced in his cold voice. These creatures come from a world so dangerous that our classification system cannot properly describe it. They breathe poison, drink acid, and treat lethal environments as recreational. Areas, Crixtall stepped forward with his four arms spread wide. More importantly, they fight as a unified group even when separated. Our trials tested individual strength, but they turned it into a team exercise. This suggests a level of cooperation that could make them extremely dangerous in large numbers. Zethra's crystal body reflected the lights of the chamber as she added her own observations. Their technology is primitive, but their thinking is advanced. The human engineer improved our machines within hours of seeing them. Their tactical officer defeated our warriors through endurance rather than strength. Their communication specialist learned 3 of our languages in a matter of days. The chamber erupted in noise as different species shouted their opinions. The Vorthak wanted to test human combat abilities in real battles. The Shardlings wanted to study human creativity and problem-solving. The Umbrax were split between admiration and terror. From the smaller species section came angry voices demanding to know why they had been excluded from the assembly if weak-looking bipeds could qualify. The Catherian fish people pointed out that they lived in crushing ocean depths. The Piranian rock-eaters mentioned that they survived on worlds with surface temperatures hot enough to melt steel. Elder Morthgax rose from his seat, and the entire chamber fell silent. The ancient Vorthak was older than most civilizations, and his word carried more weight than armies. When he spoke, his voice was like distant thunder. The question before us is not whether these humans are dangerous, he said slowly. The question is what their existence means for our understanding of the galaxy itself. Dongwu felt all eyes turned toward him and his crew. He had been listening to the translation of the debate and understanding more than the aliens realized. Ji-Hai had been teaching him and the others some basic galactic standard during their stay on the assembly station. "May I speak?" Dongwu asked in carefully pronounced alien words. The request caused another eruption of noise. No non-member had ever addressed the assembly, and many species considered it an insult. But Elder Morthgax raised one massive hand, and the chamber grew quiet again. "You may speak human," the elder said, "but choose your words carefully." Dongwu walked to the center of the platform and looked around at the thousands of alien faces watching him. Some looked curious, while others looked hungry. A few seemed ready to attack if he said the wrong thing. "My name is Lee Dongwu, and I speak for the crew of Soul's Pride and for humanity," he began. "We did not come here seeking conflict or trying to prove we were dangerous. We came because we heard what we thought was a distress call and wanted to help." Murmurs ran through the crowd. The idea of risking death to help strangers was apparently strange to many species. You ask what makes humans dangerous, and I will tell you. We are dangerous because we do not accept that anything is impossible. When we found a world covered in poison air, we learned to breathe it. When we found oceans full of predators, we learned to swim in them. When we found ice that could freeze us solid, we learned to build fires, more murmurs, and some worried looks. The aliens were starting to understand that human dangerousness was not about physical strength. But most of all, we are dangerous because we believe that working together makes us stronger than working alone. Every human achievement happened because many humans cooperated. We did not conquer our world by fighting it. We conquered it by working with each other. Nextar stepped closer to Dongwu, and his shadow form seemed to reach out like grasping fingers. You speak of cooperation, but the galaxy is built on strength. The strong survive and the weak serve, or die. This is the natural order. Maybe for you, Dongwu replied. But humans learned long ago that the natural order could be changed. We made tools to be stronger. We made medicines to live longer. We made communication devices to share knowledge faster. We did not accept what nature gave us. We made it better. The chamber erupted again as aliens tried to process this idea. Several species began arguing among themselves about whether changing the natural order was possible or wise. Elder Morthgax stood again, and silence returned. You claim that cooperation is strength, but you are only 4 individuals. How can you prove such a claim? Before Dongwu could answer, alarms started ringing throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed and voices announced something in multiple languages. Ji-Hai listened carefully and then grabbed Dongwu's arm. Captain, there is a distress call from planet Kythera 9. 3 rescue missions have already failed, and they are asking for help. Elder Morthgax looked surprised. How do you know this, human? Because we have been monitoring your communications frequencies since we arrived, Somin said with a small smile. We are explorers. Listening for distress calls is what we do. The elder studied them for a long moment. Kythera 9 is classified as a Class X Deathworld. It has gravity storms that can crush ships and metal hurricanes that shred anything in their path. We have lost 12 vessels trying to rescue the survey team trapped there. Then you need help, Tejo said simply. From 4 humans? Krixtal laughed harshly. What could you possibly do that our greatest warriors could not? We could try working together instead of competing with each other, Dongwu replied. Let us lead a joint rescue mission with volunteers from your species. We will show you how cooperation works. The chamber fell silent as thousands of aliens considered this proposal. The idea of following humans into danger was absurd to most of them, but the rescue missions had failed and people were dying on Kythera 9 that Elder Morthgax made the decision. Very well. You will have volunteers from each member species and 1 ship. If you succeed, then we will consider your claims about cooperation. If you fail, then we will know that human methods are worthless. And if we succeed, Dongwu asked, then perhaps it is time for the assembly to learn new ways of thinking. 2 days later, the rescue ship launched with the strangest crew in galactic history. Dongwu commanded, while So-Min worked with Shardling engineers to modify the ship's systems. Tejo planned strategy with Vorthak warriors who had volunteered for the mission. Ji-Hai coordinated communications between species that had never worked together before. The Umbrax scout Vexron could move through shadows and see in perfect darkness. The Vorthak warrior Coldtar was strong enough to bend steel with his bare hands. The Shardling engineer Zelkin could cut through any material and analyze its structure instantly. The Piranian defender Bulkmole could survive temperatures that would vaporize most matter. As they approached Kythera 9, the volunteers were amazed to discover that the humans were not trying to be in charge of everything. Instead, they asked each alien to contribute their special abilities while Dongwu coordinated their efforts. The planet was worse than the reports had indicated. Gravity fields twisted and changed without warning, while storms of liquid metal raged across the surface. The previous rescue attempts had failed because each species had tried to use their own methods without considering what others could contribute. Zelkin, can you cut us a path through the metal storm while Bakamol shields us from the heat? Somin asked while studying the sensor readings. Vexron can scout ahead through the shadows while Koltar clears debris from our path, Tejo added while planning their route. The aliens looked at each other in confusion. They were used to competing for the chance to be heroes. The idea of everyone working together toward the same goal was new to them. You want us to help each other instead of proving who is strongest? Koltar asked. I want us to save those people, Dongwu replied. Everything else is just details. The rescue mission took 18 hours and tested every member of the crew. They fought through metal hurricanes and gravity storms that would have destroyed any single ship. But by combining their abilities and sharing the dangerous work, they managed to reach the trapped survey team and bring them home safely. When they returned to the assembly station, they found the entire galaxy watching. News of the successful rescue had spread, and species everywhere were talking about the humans who had done the impossible by working with their enemies. Elder Morthgax met them at the docking bay with what might have been a smile on his ancient face. It seems that cooperation is indeed a form of strength, he admitted. Perhaps it is time for the Assembly to vote on humanity's place in the galactic community. Dongwu looked at his crew and saw pride in their eyes. They had not just saved lives. The vote that would decide humanity's fate was the most important event in galactic history. Representatives from thousands of species gathered in the great chamber of the assembly station, while billions more watched on communication networks that spanned the galaxy. Li Dongwu and his crew waited in a side chamber while the aliens debated their future. Elder Morthgax called for order, and the massive chamber fell silent. We are here to vote on whether humans should be granted membership in the Galactic Deathworld Assembly, and if so, what level of authority they should hold. The debate that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves agreeing while old allies split apart over the human question. The successful rescue mission at Kithara 9 had changed many minds, but it had also raised new fears. Krixtal spoke for the Vorthak military faction. These humans have proven their worth through deed and action. They saved lives that we could not save, and they did it by making us work together. I say we grant them full membership and learn from their methods. But Nextar disagreed, and his shadow form seemed to fill the speaking platform. They are dangerous precisely because they make us work together. For millions of years, the strong have ruled and the weak have served. This is the natural order. If we follow human ideas, then everything we have built will collapse. From the smaller species sections came voices that had never been heard in the assembly before. The Catherian representative swam in a mobile water tank as she spoke. Why should only Deathworld species be allowed to join this assembly? My people live in crushing ocean depths, but we are excluded because we do not look dangerous enough. The Pyranian delegate rumbled agreement from his heat-resistant suit. We survive on worlds with surface temperatures of 2,000 degrees, but we are not considered worthy because we eat rocks instead of flesh. Elder Morthgax tried to maintain order, but the chamber was descending into chaos. Thousands of years of galactic hierarchy were being questioned, and no one knew what should replace it. That was when something unexpected happened. Ancient beings that most species thought were myths began to appear in the chamber. The firstborn had been watching galactic civilization develop for millions of years, but had never interfered directly. Now they materialized like living starlight, and their voices carried the weight of ages. We have been silent too long, spoke their leader, whose name was older than language. We quarantined the Earth system long ago because our analysis showed it was too dangerous to contact. Yet here stand its children, proving that our fears were justified. The entire chamber fell silent as beings older than most stars explained their ancient decision. The world called Earth produces creatures that do not accept limits. They change their environment instead of adapting to it. They cooperate instead of competing. They view the impossible as merely difficult. Such beings could reshape the galaxy itself. Dongwu felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the implications. Humanity had been isolated not to protect them, but to protect everyone else. The most advanced beings in the galaxy had been afraid of what humans might do if they reached the stars. Yet they are here now, the firstborn continued. And they have already begun to change how others think and act. The question is not whether to accept them, but how to guide the transformation they will inevitably cause. Elder Morthgax stood and faced the ancient beings with respect, but also determination. "What do you propose?" "A new structure," the firstborn replied. The old assembly was built on the idea that only the strong deserve to rule. But these humans have shown that cooperation can be stronger than competition. Perhaps it is time to try a different approach. The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. Species argued about democracy and cooperation and shared governance in concepts that many had never considered before. Some wanted to maintain the old ways while others demanded complete revolution. During the 3rd day, Dongwu asked permission to address the assembly again. When he stood on the central platform, thousands of beings watched him with expressions ranging from hope to fear to anger. "You are debating what to do about humans, but you are asking the wrong question," he began. "The question is not whether to accept us into your system. The question is whether your system should continue to exist at all." The chamber erupted in angry voices, but Dongwu continued speaking. "For millions of years you have divided the galaxy into the strong and the weak. You have built a hierarchy based on who can survive the worst conditions and who can kill the most enemies. But what has this accomplished?" He gestured to the arguing representatives around him. "You have created a galaxy where different species fear and hate each other. Where cooperation is seen as weakness and asking for help is shameful. Where entire civilizations are excluded from governance because they do not look dangerous enough. What alternative do you propose?" Nextar demanded. "A cooperative galactic council where every species has a voice regardless of how dangerous their homeworld is," Dongwu replied. "Where problems are solved through shared knowledge instead of individual strength. Where the goal is not to prove who is strongest but to make everyone safer and more prosperous." The chamber fell silent as aliens considered this radical idea. The concept of giving political power to species based on their contributions rather than their ability to survive Deathworlds was revolutionary. "And what role would humans play in this new system?" Elder Morthgax asked. "Whatever role we earn through our actions," Dongwu said. "We do not want to rule anyone. We want to help everyone work together toward common goals." The vote, when it Iadaris finally came, was closer than anyone expected. The old guard wanted to maintain the existing hierarchy while progressives pushed for complete reform. In the end, a compromise was reached that satisfied no one completely, but gave everyone something. They wanted the Galactic Deathworld Assembly would continue to exist, but would become just one branch of a new cooperative galactic council. Species would be represented based on their population and contributions, rather than just their survival abilities. Humans would be granted a special position as adaptive coordinators, whose job was to help different species work together on difficult problems. Captain Li Dongwu was elected as the first human Grand Coordinator, while his crew members took leadership roles in the new system. Somin became head of the Interspecies Engineering Corps, where she worked with alien engineers to solve technical problems that no single species could handle alone. Taeho led the Cooperative Defense Force, which was tasked with protecting all member species rather than just the strongest ones. Instead of competing for dominance, the military forces of different species learned to complement each other's abilities. HFY took charge of the Department of Communication and Cultural Exchange, where she helped species understand each other better and resolve conflicts through dialogue rather than violence. The new system was not perfect, and there were many problems in the early years. Some species refused to join and continued the old ways of competition and dominance. Others tried to take advantage of the cooperative spirit for their own benefit. But slowly the galaxy began to change. Worlds that had been considered impossible to colonize were settled through joint efforts that combined the abilities of multiple species. Scientific discoveries accelerated as researchers shared knowledge freely instead of hoarding it for military advantage. Most importantly, the galaxy became a safer place. When disasters struck entire species no longer faced them alone. The Cooperative Council could mobilize resources from across the galaxy to help anyone in need. 6 months after the vote, Dongwu stood on the observation deck of the new council headquarters, watching ships from dozens of species working together to build a research station. In the distance, he could see Earth shining like a blue jewel among the stars. "Any regrets, Captain?" So-Min asked as she joined him at the window. "About crashing that assembly meeting," Dongwu replied with a smile. "Not at all. Sometimes the best things happen by accident." HFY and Taeho arrived carrying reports about their latest projects. The communication department had just established first contact with 3 new species, while the Defense Force had successfully evacuated an entire planet before its star went supernova. "New distress signal coming in from the Galactic Rim," Taeho announced. "Unknown ship type, and the signal is unlike anything in our databases." Dongwu felt the familiar excitement of exploration stirring in his chest. "How far out?" 3 weeks. "At maximum speed with a full fleet," HFY replied. "Could be first contact with something completely new." "Then we better get ready," Dongwu said. "The galaxy just got a little bigger and we have work to do." As the 4 humans headed back to prepare for another mission, Dongwu reflected on how much had changed since they crashed into that alien station. They had set out to explore space and ended up revolutionizing galactic civilization. The old Deathworld assembly had been built on the idea that only the strongest deserved to lead, but humans had shown the galaxy something better. They had proven that cooperation was stronger than competition, and that helping others was more important than proving superiority. The galaxy was still a dangerous place full of hostile environments and unknown threats.